The human spirit knows no bounds. This ephemeral and intangible part of the human experience that weaves its way into every single individual human and insists upon manifesting within the individual human. That spirit is indomitable. So how do we as individuals foster this expression of the human spirit in ourselves? Well, I'm about to tell you. It seems to me that in our culture, there are many forces at work that seek to induce individuals to conform and actually to almost voluntarily shackle themselves and stay within the bounds of this culturally created prison.
He said, I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made, or to even see it as a prison.
Camus, the French philosopher, had something to say about this. Something along the lines of, the greatest revolutionary act is to be as free as possible in an unfree world. Something like that. This is sort of the same sentiment in this video. Our world is fake, it's counterfeit. All of these forces are inducing in you a fake version that is willing to shackle itself and that's willing to conform to what these forces want. So, the most revolutionary act is turning your back to those forces and embodying the human spirit in yourself by cultivating your authentic, true self. Now, what does that mean? Okay, first off, why the reluctance to allow the expression of the human spirit in this counterfeit world? Well, because the fake world will punish you for doing so. But that punishment can be thought of almost as like an exercise. Okay, you voluntarily expose yourself to this punishment and you gain the strength to be able to overcome it. Okay, that's just like one test. But that reluctance to express your true self is also understandable because you are turning your back on the counterfeit world, which subtly demands that you conform to its standards. And so when you say no, you're rejecting its demand, which obviously it's not going to be happy about. But so this reluctance is very understandable because within humans, we're biological organisms, of course, and we have a threat detection apparatus, an evolved threat detection and risk avoidance apparatus. And it makes sense in an ancestral environment, as you were, say, approaching the edge of a cliff. It makes sense to feel anxious and some trepidation towards going any further, because that would have prevented you from throwing yourself off and hurtling towards certain death in the sea below. So that anxiety prevents you from getting too close to the edge. It's understandable. But this threat detection apparatus has been co-opted by our counterfeit world, our fake world, and is being gamed. It's being kept in a state of hyper arousal by certain narratives that are all pervasive because of the technologies that we have to be able to spread messages. But the narrative of climate change, a looming threat in the future that threatens the very existence of humanity, the threat of pandemics, natural spillovers could occur at any moment. It could be a virus that could extinct the human species. These narratives, fear-mongering narratives that are perpetuated by our counterfeit world, induce in the individual a threat detection response, and it keeps your apparatus hyper aroused. Now what does that do? That causes you to shell up, to reject any impulse towards embodying the human spirit and cultivating your authentic self, and to then look around in your immediate environment and seek out a self-elected authoritative figure who claims to know what to do. That's when you then submit to that authoritative figure. Come on, that's not on. Marcus Aurelius also had something to say about this. He said something along the lines of, it's funny how we love ourselves so much, but value the opinions of others over our own opinion of ourselves. So we need to reevaluate our values and place more value in expressing our authentic selves. And we need to understand that pain and suffering in life is inevitable. We're never going to avoid it totally. So that threat detection mechanism being hyper aroused by these forces in our fake world and causing us to shell up, we're never ever going to be able to protect ourselves against all threats and risk. So we might as well voluntarily step up and confront the threats and risks that we are capable of confronting in the moment, and incrementally become ever better at confronting ever greater threats and risks, so that when we are forced to confront a threat that we didn't voluntarily expose ourselves to, we have the training complete and we're able to deal with it. So just to finish off this thought, imagine for a moment that you either died or you're tripping out real hard and you find yourself stood before a council of people who are seated in a tiered seating system, not to denote hierarchy, just a tiered seating system that is as high as your eye can see and as wide as your eye can see. So there's a lot of people here. These are all very elegant people. They're dressed in lightly coloured, silky clothing, almost like tunics that are just flowing in a gentle breeze that's blowing through them. Some of them are stood up, some of them are sat down, some of them are joking and laughing, some of them are staring directly at you, judgingly. You are stood before a group of people that, some of which are your ancestors, some of which are your descendants, and some of which are your own personal conception of the hypothetical ideal human being that in your life you did strive to become, hopefully. As you're stood there, you're being judged. For all intents and purposes, these people are more or less omniscient because they have their own experience and they have played back the movie of your life and are very familiar with it up to this point that you're at now, where you're stood before them. They're judging you. Will you be judged as worthy of them? That's the question. Your ancestors had to endure an awful lot of terrible situations. Are you worthy of that suffering? Your descendants have to deal with what you left them. Are they happy with what you left them? Or is it acceptable? And the hypothetical ideal human beings of your own mind, did you adequately strive to become that version of yourself? That's all that they ask of you, is for your pursuit of becoming like them to be good enough. If the answer is yes to all three, happy days. You may stride proudly towards them as one of them. If the answer is no, you will be duly punished. Oh my God. That is some thought. But I think that is a thought that can recalibrate your threat detection mechanism to reject this insistence upon it being stimulated and hyper aroused by the likes of the climate change narrative and pandemics. Not that these don't have some truth in them, they may have truth in them, but don't let it overwhelm you to the point where you shell up and seek an authority. Now you can recalibrate that mechanism or the apparatus and reorient yourself in the world to confront reality in all of its complexity and messiness as best you can, so that when your day of judgment comes, you can walk proudly into that group of people and become one of them.